Good morning. Today we are graphing using slope-intercept form, which is a big fancy way for saying we are just solving for y. Another thing slope-intercept form means is that we are able to identify a slope and a y-intercept from an equation. So that equation is this right here, y equals mx plus b. You may have heard this before, maybe not. It says a linear equation of the form y equals mx plus b is written in slope-intercept form, where m is the slope, we talked about that on 4.4, and b is the y-intercept, or where we're crossing the y-axis. So here, just like they say, is the same equation, but this one just has numbers in it. So our slope is in front of the x, that's why I've been telling you to write your x's first when you solve for y. And then our y-intercept is whatever number is added or subtracted onto the end. So if this was a minus 1, it would be down 1. So we graph an equation like this first by looking at our y-intercept, where we cross the y-axis. So this one was at positive 1, so that's why they started there at 1. And then their slope was rise over run. So 1 over 3, so they went up 1 from that point, and over 1, 2, 3. And then if we did that again, up 1 over 1, 2, 3, that's how they created their line that they drew right there. Okay? We're going to first just solve for y and identify m and b. So here's y equals mx plus b. This equation is already solved for y, so we need to identify our slope m and our y-intercept b. So m, my slope in front of the x, is 3. And then b, added or subtracted to the end. This one's added, so it's a positive 4. Alright, this one is not solved for y, so we need to do that first. I need to move this 3x over to the other side. The opposite of a positive 3x is negative 3x. Those eliminate. We have y equals, now our x's are first, negative 3x, and that's a positive 2, so plus 2. So first our m, our slope in front of the x, is negative 3. And then b, what's added or subtracted, this one's a positive 2. You don't need the plus, but you can if you want to. Let's solve a couple more for y. This again is what we call slope-intercept form or function form. I'm going to move this 1x over to the other side, so subtract 1x. 1 minus 1 is 0, so we have 4y. And then write your x's first. Negative 1x and a positive 6, so plus 6. We can't combine them because one has an x and the other doesn't. Then last, the opposite of multiplying by 4 is divide by 4. Divide each part by 4. So we're left with y equals, now if it's a fraction, always just leave it as a fraction, negative 1 over 4x, if it's your slope in front of the x. If it's something just added or subtracted onto the end, we don't really care as much about that. You can convert that to a decimal. So in your calculator, 6 over 4, you could type in, otherwise you could simplify it to 3 over 2, both give you 3.5. So identifying our m, our slope in front of the x is negative 1 over 4. And our b, y-intercept, is right here, a positive 1.5. Next we have, again, same thing, solve for y. This is a positive 3x. I'm going to move it by subtracting 3x. Those eliminate. We have negative 3y. And then write your x's first. You can't combine them. Negative 3x and plus 12. Y is not by itself yet. The opposite of multiplying by negative 3 is dividing by negative 3. So those eliminate. We have y equals, well, now two negatives make a positive when you multiply and divide, and 3 over 3 is just 1. And then 12 divided by negative 3 is going to give us a negative 4. So m, our slope, in front of the x is 1, or if you want to write it as a fraction, 1 over 1, because our slope, in order to draw a line, would be a fraction. And then b is not just 4, it's negative 4, because it's subtraction there. Next one like this, solving for y, I'm going to move this 6x over to the other side, so subtract 6x. Eliminated, we have 2y equals negative 6x plus 14. And then the opposite of multiply is divide. So divide everything by 2. We get y equals, and negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3x. And 14 divided by 2 is 7. Oops. So identify m, our slope. First is negative 3 in front of the x. And then b is a positive 7 added on to the end. Alright, I would suggest that you try these first two on your own and then play the video to check and see if you're right. I'm going to solve this one. Get rid of my x's because we want y by itself. I'm going to subtract 4x over to the other side. We have negative 5y, and then write your x's first, negative 4x plus 15. And then last, the opposite of multiply is divide. So we're going to divide by that number, negative 5, on both sides. And we end up with y equals, here two negatives make a positive, so we have 4/5 x plus 15 divided by negative 5, oops, is not going to be a plus. 15 divided by negative 5 is a negative 3. So there's our equation. It's in the form y equals mx plus b, slope-intercept form. And then identify the slope and the y-intercept. Our slope in front of our x is 4/5, 4 over 5. And then b, our y-intercept, is not 3, it's negative 3. This one, if you solve this on your own too, there are two ways you could have done this one. You could have moved the x over to the other side and the 5 over to the other side and then got rid of that negative 2. Or, if our goal is to get y by itself, we can just move the y's over to the other side. Because nothing's over there right now. This is a negative 2y, so if I move that, I'm going to add 2y. So we have 2x plus 5 equals 2y. Now y is not by itself yet, it's multiplied, so I'm going to divide everything by 2. And we end up with y equals, 2 over 2 is just 1x, or you can make it 1 over 1, and plus 5 divided by 2, which would give us 2.5 in my calculator. So this one, it looks backwards, but it's still y equals, it's okay. Our m, our slope, in front of the x is 1. And then our b, what's added or subtracted, is 2.5. Alright, the next one. There's no x in this, but we can still solve for y. I'm just going to subtract 4. We have y equals negative 4. Now, this doesn't look like a regular equation in the form y equals mx plus b. It really is, though. It's really y equals no x's, and there's a negative 4 there. We just normally don't write 0x. It's just not there, so they just have y equals negative 4. So our m, our slope, is really a 0, and our b, our y-intercept, is negative 4. There is one question on your homework where you get x equals a number, like maybe x equals 4, and it asks you to find your m and your b. Well, this one's a little bit tricky because there is no slope. This one, if we were to graph this, I know we haven't gotten to graphing yet, would be a vertical line. So our slope is really undefined, and our b, our y-intercept, it's not crossing this y-axis at all, so there is none. So just know that's a little bit of a tricky one. Don't worry about that for now. Alright, we need to identify the slope m and our y-intercept b, and then graph the equation. Reminder that these are in the form y equals mx plus b already. So our m, our slope, first, this one is 2, but if we're going to graph it as a fraction would be 2 over 1, and b is 4. So here's y, here's x. So b tells me where to begin graphing. So I'm going to begin graphing on my y-axis at 4, right there. And then m tells me how to move. My move is always rise over run. So I'm going to rise 2 from this point up 2 and run. Positive numbers are to the right, negative numbers would be to the left. We don't ever go negative really. So rise up 2, positive 2, and 1 to the right. Well, I can't go any further, so the opposite of up and right would be down and left. Down 2, 1 to the left. Down 2, 1 to the left. And then draw a line through it. Put arrows on the end to show that it could go on both ways. Alright, here's our next one. This is in the form y equals mx plus b. Our m, or our slope, in front of the x is 5 over 3. Don't include the letter when you just write m equals. And then b, we're really beginning at 0. So again, b tells me where to begin on my y-axis. So we're beginning at 0. And my slope tells me how to move. Rise over run. Rise 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and run 1, 2, 3. And the opposite of up and right would be down and left. We went up 5, so I went down 5. We went right 3, so I went left 3. And draw your line through there. There is the equation y equals 5/3 x. Next on slide 5, identify your slope and your y-intercept. I wasn't very nice to you. We need to solve this for y. So first I'm going to add my 6x over to the other side. We have negative 4y equals. Now we want this in the form y equals mx plus b, so I'm going to write my x term first. 6x, and then plus 8. And then last, the opposite of multiplying by 4 is dividing by 4, negative 4. So our equation is y equals 6 over 4 we can simplify. If we divide by 2, that's really 3 over 2, so it's negative, so negative 3 over 2x. And 8 divided by negative 4 is negative 2. So there's our equation. M and b we need to identify. M is our slope, negative 3 over 2. And b tells us where to begin. We're beginning at negative 2. So begin at negative 2 on my y-axis. And then be careful, rise over run. We're not going up this time. Negative 3 tells me first to go down 3, and then positive 2 is to the right. Down 3 and 2 to the right. The opposite of down and right would be up 3 and 2 to the left. Notice it's still forming a straight line. Up 3, 2 to the left. And draw your line through it. Put arrows on both ends. Alright. Next, solve for y. The opposite of multiplying by negative 4 is dividing by negative 4. So we have y equals a negative 4. 16 divided by negative 4 was negative 4. And we need to identify m and b. Now this one is like that other one we did earlier. It is in the form y equals mx plus b. M, our slope, is really just 0. It's really y equals 0x minus 4. So our m is 0, and our b is negative 4. So we're beginning at -4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And a slope of 0 would be a horizontal line. This is one to remember. It's the same as saying we're going to cross the y-axis at -4, which is what we're doing. We're going through the y-axis at -4. Alright, I would like you to try these two on your own, and then check with the video, press play, see if you got them right. So this one's already solved for y. Our m in front of x is really a -1 as a fraction, 1 over 1. And b is 5. So beginning at 5, positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is right there on my y-axis. And then m tells me how to move. Rise over run. And instead of going up for our rise, it says negative, which is going down. And then positive numbers here are to the right. So down 1, 1 to the right, down 1, 1 to the right. Or up 1, 1 to the left. Now, if you're not sure if you graphed it right, your slope went to this way instead of this way, that is where I would double check your slopes. So what I mean by that, this slope is negative. If we were to walk down this slope, it would also be negative for walking downhill. If yours was accidentally this way, you'd be walking uphill, which would not match. So make sure it's going the right way. Alright, let's look at the next one. This one I need to solve for y, so this 1x I need to move to the other side and subtract 1x. We have -3y, don't forget the negative. Write your x's first, -1x plus 6. And then the opposite of multiplying is divide. Divide everything by -3. Two negatives multiplied make a positive. 1 does not divide into 3, just leave it as 1/3. And then 6 divided by -3 is -2. So our m, our slope, is 1 over 3. And b, our y-intercept, is -2. So here's y, here's x. Our beginning, our y-intercept is -2, so start at down 2. And our slope is 1 over 3. Rise 1, run 3. So up 1, oops, don't put a dot there yet. And over 1, 2, 3. Rise 1, over to the right 3. The opposite of up and right would be down 1 and 3 to the left. Down 1 and 3 to the left. And there's our line. Forgot to put arrows on this one. Make sure you have arrows on there to show that it can continue to go on. Now the last quick thing that we are learning about is parallel lines. Notice that these are all parallel. If I was to plot this on my x and y axis and look at this line and this line, they would never touch. They're always the same distance apart, and they would have the same slope if I counted from here to here and here to here. They would have the same slope, down 1 and over 2, down 1 and over 2, okay? So we are going to look at these lines to determine which of them are parallel. We have line A, B, and C. Two non-vertical lines with the same slope are parallel. Determine which of the lines are parallel by finding the slope of each line. Now you could use your equation y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 to find our slope, but an easier way to do that would just be to count rise over run. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at line A first. From this point to this point, I'm rising 1 and running 1, 2, 3. 1 over 3. Then line B, from here to here, I'm rising 1, 2, and running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice I'm always starting on the left to do rise over run. If you went from the other way, and you went -2 and -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -2 over -5 still both makes a positive 2/5. So then our last line, line C, from this point to this point, we're rising 1, 2, and running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, to me it looks like none of these are actually the same, but we can simplify this one by dividing by 2, which would give us 1 over 3. So 1/3 and 1/3 are the same, so line A and line C are parallel. Instead of writing out the words line A is parallel to line C, we can write A, 2 lines tilted a little bit, means parallel to line C. Our last slide here, same thing. Tell whether the graphs are parallel and explain. Well, just like we did back here, we looked at their slope, our m. That's what we're going to do over here as well. Here's our comma between our two equations. If they have the same slope, they are parallel. So this one is already in the form y equals mx plus b. So in front of our x, our slope is -0.5. So we need to solve this problem to see if it has the same slope. This is really a 1x, so I'm going to move that to the other side, subtract 1x. We get 2y equals -1x plus 18. And then divide everything by 2. We get y equals, leave it as a fraction, -1 over 2x, plus 18 divided by 2 is 9. So our slope in this equation, right here in front of our x, is -1 over 2. Now, they don't look the same, but 0.5 is 1/2 as a fraction. If you converted this to a decimal, they would be the same. So yes, they are parallel because they have the same slope. Or you could say both of the slopes are 1/2, -1/2. Over here we have to solve both of them. I'm going to get y all by itself, so I'm going to move this 4x by subtracting 4x. Those eliminate. We have y equals -4x plus 3. So this one, our slope in front of our x is -4. This one, if I solve this one, I'm going to move this 1x over to the other side, subtract 1x. Just like the last one. We have 4y, write your x's first, -1x plus 3. And then to get rid of the 4, divide everything by 4. We have y equals -1 over 4x plus 3/4. We don't really care about what b is right now. We only care to look at our slope to figure out if they're parallel. And this one, our slope is -1/4. They're both negative, but they're not the same number. This is 4, this is 1/4. Those are very different numbers. Okay? So, your homework is a worksheet. So, go ahead and make sure you get that done. Make sure you ask if you have questions as well.